Human beings are always in favor of pleasure. Although life is an imbalanced and absurd mixture of both pleasure and pain. In the end, we are all dead. We are perfectly alright with that. As Albert Camus said, we either hope or commit suicide, be it literal or philosophical. Because life is so much of fun, we just do not want to give up. We need something to cling on to. We need something to hope on. On the contrary, German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer felt that life is all about suffering. Pleasure can never define life in all its totality. Friedrich Nietzsche would have said life is beyond pleasure and pain. Then there is Kafka, the greatest weird and wonderful writer from Europe. Kafka throughout his life had genuinely struggled to define life with all its contradictions, confusions, absurdities and ironies. Even in his wonderful and profoundly moving and confusing and a kind of a novella that creates eerie effects, Metamorphosis, Kafka, just like Schopenhauer, made an attempt to view life through the eyes of a beast, or let us say a bug. But interestingly as well as ironically, this creature has human consciousness. One fine day when George Sumser woke up, he realized that he has been mutated or he has been morphed into a gigantic bug, something like that, right? I mean, that is how the great work Metamorphosis begins. So today, Professor Ram Prasad has agreed to join us to talk about Franz Kafka, the king of mysteries and paradoxes. Welcome to our show, sir. So I am curious to hear your thoughts on Kafka's style, which keeps all the paradoxes tightly woven in every piece of literature he ever produced. So can you talk about that, sir?
Thank you, Goutam. Thank you very much for allowing me an opportunity to talk about Kafka. Thank you also for your very spirited introduction of Kafka. I would like to add some more to your introduction of Kafka. See, there is a general Kafka and there is a specific Kafka. By general Kafka, what I mean is that many people at different points of time have found his fiction to be relevant. Kafka has become an adjective, Kafkaesque. The word Kafkaesque has been used to talk about the Nazi atrocities in Germany which happened after the death of Kafka, to the atrocities in Soviet Union, to the apartheid experience in South Africa, and even an American lawmaker, judge, used the word Kafkaesque to describe a particular trial which was happening in America. So it's very interesting that someone who wrote at a particular point of time is relevant in different places. So this is the general Kafka. But this general Kafka has come out of a specific Kafka, that is a specific individual living at a particular time in a particular place. So Kafka was a German living in Prague. He was at the beginning of his life, he lived in an empire which was multilingual. Towards the end of his life, it became a nation state of Czechoslovakia with Czech as the official language. Kafka also could lay claim to Hebrew and Yiddish, which he learned later on. So he could lay claim to many languages. But there are also insecurities of a German in Czechoslovakia, of a Jew among the Christians. There were many insecurities. He was also the son of a particular father. He was also the son of a particular kind of father. He was part of a particular kind of family. So there are these specific aspects of Kafka. For example, there were a lot of pressures on the Jews, both from inside and outside, to change themselves. There were a lot of expectations from the Jews to transform their bodies. Maybe we'll be able to talk about it a bit later on. There was also a lot of pressure which his father, according to Kafka, his father imposed a lot of pressure on him. Kafka probably also felt that he was a minor cog in a capitalist enterprise. He was a, let's say, insurance agent in a firm. But we should be careful here, because though Kafka repeatedly expresses dissatisfaction about his job, he was successful in his job. He was repeatedly promoted. And he did some good work. Like he wrote reports which were used by many other capitalist firms, and his reports about accident prevention helped people. So it is not all suffering in the life of Kafka.
They even published those books that Kafka has written
Yes.
as a part of his
Bureaucratic work. Okay. So there was that pressure also. Now, these different insecurities, the insecurities that he felt as a son, insecurities that he felt as a Jew, the insecurities that he felt as an unwitting cog in a bureaucratic machine, insecurities that he felt about his own body. He was a hypochondriac. That is, if Kafka he did not get tuberculosis, he would probably have invented a disease for himself. He was always, he was always uncomfortable with his body. He was always thinking he was unhealthy. All these insecurities, Kafka has been able to express them through metaphor, and hence they apply to many different kinds of people. Think that they apply to us. They are describing our situation. I would also like to add a bit more here. You talked about metamorphosis, and you see, in Metamorphosis and in The Hunger Artist, there is fasting. Yeah. Now, this fasting is not because these people want to fast. It's like in both those stories. It's in Hunger Artist, for example, he says something like, I can't but not fast.
I can't but not fast.
Yeah, something like that. So that's the same in Metamorphosis towards the end also.
True.
It seems that there is an appetite for something more mysterious. There is an appetite for something more profound than just the physical appetite for eating. It seems that these protagonists want to cross the appetites of the ordinary life. And that's what Kafka's mystery is, according to me.
You talked about intense appetite, or let us say spiritual hunger, that almost all characters of Kafka experience. Strangely, even in real life, Kafka craved for his father's recognition or approval. Why do you think he had that kind of obsession? There is also a saying which more or less goes like, you cannot choose your blood father, but you can always choose your spiritual father. But interestingly or ironically, in Kafka's case, he wanted his blood father to be his spiritual father. Why do you think he was craving for that kind of attention? Let's talk about that, sir.
Yes, you talked about the anxiety that Kafka had about whether his father will understand him or not. So there is always this anxiety whether the system will understand us or not. Okay? But there is the opposite anxiety also, whether you are able to understand the father, whether you are able to understand the laws behind the different kinds of system. Now, Kafka's father was very prominent in his life and writing. There is the line between Kafka's life and his writing is very blurred. It is said that when Kafka wrote letters, he was writing fiction. And when he wrote fiction, there is so much of reality. The father comes into his fiction, including certain physical details, like the wound on the thigh of the father in the Judgment. He was a very dominating figure. But to be fair, we only know what Kafka tells us. We don't have the point of view of his father. Maybe his father was not unique in many ways. Maybe some of us would say, my father was strict, that's why I am successful. Maybe some people would say, my father was not strict, that's why I am not successful. But Kafka is hypersensitive. Yeah. So to him, it seemed that his father was a giant. He was much bigger than what this child Kafka is. He visualizes his father's body as occupying the whole of Atlas. There are not many places where his father has not covered. So Kafka would say, you have not left me many places. So the father's influence is always there on Kafka. Even whether father is there or not, it's kind of, he has internalized that fear. So we should look at it, I think, from a child's point of view. Now, when a child looks at parents or father, there are two possible things. One is the child wants to understand us. The second is there is a sense of guilt. Now, let's begin with guilt. Most of the time we tell children to do certain things and not to do certain things. From the child's point of view, there is no rationality for that. Okay? For a child, it's doing certain natural things. But parents try to impose and say, don't do this and don't do that. A child does not know when it has committed something wrong. Let's say a strict father comes home, looks at the child and says, you. And already the child is saying, oh, maybe I have done something. So there is this guilt, which probably is the source of this unknown guilt in many of the characters in Kafka. Yeah. Secondly, there is this anxiety to understand. To give a very simple example, we tell children not to tell lies, whereas we tell lies. Yeah. So a child would look at us and say, okay, there is contradiction. Yeah. Most of the time we say, do as I tell you, not as I do. Though I am giving simple example, this is exactly what Kafka also says. Can I understand my father? What are the contradictions? Okay. So there is this story called as Knock at the Manor Gates. This brother and sister are passing through a village, and accidentally the sister knocks on the manor gate. She is not even sure whether she has knocked on the manor gate.
3 sentences.
Yeah.
Contradicting each other.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. So, and then the people from that house come out and they arrest the brother, etc. So, is there anything wrong that was committed? They are not sure. Is it a crime to knock on the manor gate? They are not sure. And how do you understand this system of the manor gate, system of that manor, where soldiers will come out because you have accidentally knocked on the gate, or you just intended to knock on the gate? Okay. So this is child's anxiety. This is child anxiety of guilt and incomprehension. This is what Kafka expands in many of his works.
That's great. So, and for that reason, the protagonist of that small fable suffers forever, and he sort of sacrifices himself in order to redeem his sister. He has to stay back.
Yes.
It can represent anything, I think, either death or exile or some kind of physical death as well. He was suffering from tuberculosis.
Yes.
True, sir.
I also want to add one more interesting thing. Kafka's father behaved with Kafka when he announced his engagement in the same way in which the father in Judgment behaves. Okay. And secondly, Kafka's father set detectives on his fiancée when they were engaged. But to be fair, the fiancé's father set detectives on Kafka also. That was probably something that people did at that time. Kafka being Kafka, made them into nightmares. Yeah.
So they were all suspicious of this
young
man.
The young man, yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.